The legend of Atlantis has captivated humanity for over 2,000 years, since the ancient Greek philosopher Plato first described this magnificent civilization in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BC. Plato presented Atlantis as a powerful and advanced kingdom that existed 9,000 years before his own time, situated beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we know today as the Strait of Gibraltar. This mysterious island nation allegedly possessed technology and wisdom far beyond any contemporary civilization, before vanishing beneath the waves in a single day and night of catastrophic destruction. The story of Atlantis continues to fascinate scholars, explorers, and dreamers alike, sparking countless expeditions, theories, and debates about whether this legendary city truly existed or was merely a philosophical allegory created by one of history's greatest thinkers. According to Plato's detailed accounts, Atlantis was an enormous island larger than Libya and Asia, combined, ruled by the descendants of Poseidon, the god of the sea. The island itself was described as a paradise of natural resources, with abundant minerals, precious metals, fertile soil, and diverse wildlife. The Atlanteans had created an advanced society with impressive architecture, sophisticated engineering, and a powerful military force that conquered many parts of Europe and Africa. Their capital city was constructed in concentric circles of land and water, connected by bridges and tunnels, with a magnificent temple dedicated to Poseidon at its center. The temple was adorned with gold, silver, and orichalcum, a mysterious metal more precious than anything except gold that has never been identified in our modern world. The Atlantean civilization prospered for generations, developing advanced knowledge in various fields, including agriculture, navigation, astronomy, and metallurgy. Plato described the Atlantean society as initially virtuous and noble, with citizens who valued wisdom, honor, and justice over material wealth. The rulers governed with fairness, and the people lived in harmony, following the laws established by Poseidon himself. However, as generations passed and the divine heritage became diluted, the Atlanteans grew corrupt and greedy. They became obsessed with power and conquest, launching military campaigns to expand their empire across the Mediterranean world. Their moral decay angered the gods, particularly Zeus, who decided that such corruption could not go unpunished. According to Plato's narrative, Zeus called a council of the gods to determine the fate of Atlantis, and it was decided that the island nation would be destroyed as punishment for their hubris and moral failings. In a single catastrophic event involving earthquakes and floods, the entire island of Atlantis sank beneath the ocean waves, taking with it all traces of this once magnificent civilization. Question that has puzzled historians, archaeologists, and enthusiasts for centuries is whether Plato intended his Atlantis story to be taken as historical fact or as a philosophical allegory. Many scholars argue that Plato created the Atlantis narrative as a literary device to illustrate his philosophical ideas about ideal society's governance and the consequences of moral corruption. In this interpretation, Atlantis serves as a cautionary tale, warning against the dangers of hubris, excess ambition, and the abandonment of virtue. Plato was known for using myths and allegories in his writings to convey complex philosophical concepts, making it entirely plausible that Atlantis was a fictional creation designed to teach moral lessons rather than record historical events. Supporters of this view point out that many details in Plato's account seem exaggerated or impossible, such as the enormous size of the island, the advanced technology described, and the precise timeline of events. However, other researchers and explorers have taken Plato's account literally, spending considerable time, effort, and resources searching for physical evidence of Atlantis throughout history. Numerous locations have been proposed as possible sites for the lost civilization, each with varying degrees of plausibility and supporting evidence. Some theorists believe Atlantis was located in the Mediterranean Sea, perhaps near the Greek island of Santorini, which experienced a massive volcanic eruption around 1600 BC that destroyed the Minoan civilization. This catastrophic event bears some similarities to Plato's description of Atlantis's destruction, leading some to speculate that the Minoan civilization might have inspired the Atlantis legend. The Minoan culture was indeed advanced for its time, with impressive architecture, sophisticated art, and extensive trade networks throughout the Mediterranean. Other proposed locations for Atlantis include the Azores Islands in the Atlantic Ocean, the Bahamas near the coast of Florida, the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, and even Antarctica. which some theorists suggest was ice-free in ancient times and could have supported an advanced civilization. Each of these theories is supported by various pieces of evidence, ranging from underwater formations that resemble man-made structures to geological evidence of ancient catastrophes. However, none of these theories has gained widespread acceptance in the scientific community, and most mainstream archaeologists remain skeptical about the historical existence of Atlantis. The lack of concrete archaeological evidence, contemporary historical records from other civilizations, or geological proof of a sunken continent in the locations described by Plato makes it difficult to support the claim that Atlantis was a real place. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Atlantis mystery is the detailed nature of Plato's description, which includes specific measurements, architectural details, and geographical information that seem too precise for a purely fictional account. Plato claimed that the story was passed down through generations, originating from the Athenian statesman Solon, who allegedly learned about Atlantis from Egyptian priests during his travels to Egypt around 590 BC. According to this account, the Egyptian priests possessed ancient records describing Atlantis and its conflict with Athens thousands of years earlier. This chain of transmission adds an element of historical credibility to the story, as Solon was a real historical figure known for his travels to Egypt, and Plato was his descendant. However, critics point out that no Egyptian records mentioning Atlantis have ever been discovered, despite extensive archaeological work in Egypt and the detailed study of countless ancient Egyptian texts and inscriptions. The Atlantis legend has inspired countless works of literature, art, film, and popular culture. Over the centuries, writers from Francis Bacon to Jules Verne have incorporated Atlantis into their works, often depicting it as a utopian society possessing advanced technology and wisdom. Lost to the modern world in the 19th century, the American politician and writer Ignatius Donnelly published a book titled Atlantis, the Antediluvian World, which argued that Atlantis was a real historical place and the source of all ancient civilizations. This book sparked renewed interest in Atlantis and influenced many subsequent theories and explorations. Donnelly proposed that survivors of Atlantis's destruction spread across the world, founding civilizations in Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Americas, and other regions, thereby explaining similarities in architecture, mythology, and cultural practices among ancient societies separated by vast distances. Modern technology has enabled more sophisticated searches for Atlantis, using satellite imagery, sonar mapping, and underwater exploration techniques. Several expeditions have claimed to find evidence of Atlantis in various locations, but these claims have consistently failed to withstand scientific scrutiny. In 2011, a team of researchers announced they had found evidence of Atlantis in southern Spain, using a combination of satellite photography, ground penetrating radar, and underwater exploration. They identified what they believed to be the remains of a large ancient city buried in marshlands that could match Plato's description. However, other experts quickly disputed these findings, pointing out that the structures could easily be natural geological formations or remains of known historical settlements, rather than evidence of Atlantis. The scientific community generally views the search for Atlantis with skepticism, arguing that the burden of proof lies with those claiming the civilization existed, and that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Most archaeologists and historians believe that if Atlantis existed at all, it was likely a conflation of various historical events and places rather than a single real civilization. Some suggest that Plato may have drawn inspiration from multiple sources, including the destruction of the Minoan civilization, the Persian War's stories of ancient floods and earthquakes, and his own imagination to create a compelling narrative that served his philosophical purposes. The fact that Plato was the sole ancient source for the Atlantis story, and that no other contemporary Greek or Egyptian texts mention such a civilization, raises significant doubts about its historical authenticity. Despite the skepticism of mainstream academia, the search for Atlantis continues to attract dedicated researchers and enthusiasts who believe that somewhere beneath the ocean waves or buried under layers of earth and time lies evidence of this lost civilization. They argue that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and that many archaeological discoveries throughout history have proven that legends sometimes contain kernels of historical truth. the discovery of Troy by Heinrich Schliemann in the 19th century is often cited as an example of how archaeological evidence can validate ancient stories that were previously dismissed as pure mythology before Schliemann's excavations. Many scholars believed that Homer's Iliad was entirely fictional, and that Troy never existed. The discovery of the actual city demonstrated that ancient texts can preserve historical information even when embellished with mythological elements. Proponents of Atlantis's existence also point to various underwater structures discovered in different parts of the world that they claim could be remnants of advanced ancient civilizations off the coast of Japan. Near the island of Yonaguni, divers have found massive stone structures with straight edges, right angles, and flat surfaces that some researchers believe are the remains of an ancient city. Most geologists, however, argue that these formations are natural rock formations shaped by erosion and tectonic activity rather than human construction. Similar debates surround underwater formations discovered near Cuba, the Bahamas, and other locations where unusual geometric patterns in rock formations have sparked speculation about lost civilizations. The Atlantis legend has also become intertwined with various alternative historical theories and pseudoscientific claims. Some theorists propose that Atlantis was the home of an advanced civilization that possessed technology equal to or surpassing our own, including flying machines, energy weapons, and sophisticated power sources. These theories often lack credible evidence and are rejected by mainstream scholars, but they continue to capture public imagination and generate popular interest. Other theories connect Atlantis to extraterrestrial visitors, ancient astronauts, or even survivors from previous ice ages who possessed knowledge that was later lost. These speculative ideas, while entertaining and thought-provoking, generally fail to meet the standards of evidence required by scientific inquiry. From a geological perspective, the idea of a large landmass suddenly sinking beneath the ocean presents significant challenges. Plate tectonics, the scientific theory that explains the movement of Earth's continental and oceanic plates, does not support the possibility of a continent-sized landmass disappearing in the manner described by Plato. While volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and tsunamis can certainly cause localized destruction and coastal flooding, the complete submersion of a large island or continent in a single day is not consistent with our understanding of geological processes. Small islands can be submerged due to rising sea levels or volcanic activity, but these processes typically occur over much longer timescales than Plato's account suggests. The only known examples of rapid large-scale geological changes involve volcanic eruptions like the one that destroyed Pompeii or the explosion of Krakatoa, but even these catastrophic events did not cause entire landmasses to sink beneath the sea. Some researchers have proposed that Plato's timeline was incorrect, and that if Atlantis existed, it was destroyed much more recently than 9,000 years before his time. This adjustment would place the destruction of Atlantis closer to the end of the last ice age, around 11,000 years ago, when rising sea levels submerged many coastal areas and islands around the world. During this period, known as the Younger Dryas, global climate underwent rapid changes with significant impacts on human populations and settlements. Some theorists suggest that memories of these catastrophic events could have been preserved in oral traditions and eventually influenced Plato's Atlantis narrative. However, this theory still requires significant speculation and lacks direct archaeological evidence. The cultural impact of the Atlantis legend extends far beyond academic debates about its historical authenticity. The story has become a powerful symbol in Western culture, representing lost wisdom, vanished glory, and the consequences of human hubris. Atlantis appears in countless books, movies, television shows, video games, and other media, often depicted as a technologically advanced utopia whose secrets could benefit humanity if rediscovered. This enduring fascination reflects deep human desires to connect with an idealized past, to discover hidden knowledge, and to believe that ancient peoples possessed wisdom that modern civilization has lost. The Atlantis myth also serves as a cautionary tale about environmental destruction, the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the impermanence of even the greatest civilizations. In recent decades, some researchers have attempted to approach the Atlantis question from new angles, using interdisciplinary methods that combine archaeology, geology, oceanography, and comparative mythology. These scholars examine ancient flood myths from various cultures, looking for common elements that might point to real historical events. Many ancient civilizations have legends of great floods that destroyed previous worlds, including the biblical story of Noah's Ark, the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, and flood myths from India, China, and the Americas. Some researchers suggest that these stories might preserve memories of actual catastrophic floods that occurred at the end of the last ice age, when melting glaciers caused sea levels to rise dramatically, submerging coastal settlements and forcing human populations to migrate to higher ground. If we consider the possibility that Atlantis was inspired by real events rather than being a completely fictional creation, several historical candidates emerge as potential sources for Plato's story. The Bronze Age civilization of the Minoans on Crete and surrounding islands is perhaps the most compelling candidate. The Minoans developed a sophisticated culture with impressive palaces, advanced art, and extensive maritime trade networks. Around 1600 BC, a massive volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, caused widespread destruction throughout the Aegean region. The eruption generated enormous tsunamis that devastated coastal settlements and may have contributed to the eventual decline of Minoan civilization. The parallels between this historical catastrophe and Plato's description of Atlantis are striking enough that many scholars believe the Minoan civilization, at least partially, inspired the Atlantis legend. Another possible historical basis for the Atlantis story involves the Sea Peoples, a confederation of maritime raiders who attacked civilizations throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Around 1200 BC, ancient Egyptian records describe these mysterious invaders who contributed to the collapse of several Bronze Age civilizations, including the Hittite Empire, the Mycenaean civilization, and nearly conquered Egypt itself. Some researchers speculate that the Sea Peoples might have originated from powerful island civilization that was later destroyed, providing a historical kernel for the Atlantis legend. However, the identity and origins of the Sea Peoples remain debated among historians, and no definitive evidence connects them to Atlantis. Philosophical dimensions of the Atlantis story deserve careful consideration, regardless of whether the civilization actually existed. Plato used the Atlantis narrative to explore important questions about political systems, moral corruption, and the relationship between divine will and human action. In Plato's account, Atlantis began as an ideal society guided by divine wisdom and noble principles, but gradually declined as its people became more concerned with material wealth and military conquest than with virtue and justice. This moral decay ultimately led to their destruction, serving as a warning about the consequences of abandoning ethical principles. The Atlantis story thus functions as a thought experiment, allowing Plato to examine what happens when a society loses its moral foundation and becomes corrupted by greed, ambition, and the desire for power. Modern interpretations of Atlantis often reflect contemporary concerns and preoccupations. Environmental activists sometimes use Atlantis as a metaphor for the potential consequences of climate change and environmental destruction, drawing parallels between the legendary civilization's catastrophic end and the threats facing our own society. Others see Atlantis as representing indigenous civilizations destroyed by colonization and conquest, with the lost wisdom of Atlantis symbolizing traditional knowledge systems that have been marginalized or forgotten in the modern world. These varied interpretations demonstrate how the Atlantis legend continues to evolve and remain relevant, adapting to address the concerns and anxieties of each new generation. The question of whether Atlantis was real or mythical may ultimately be less important than what the story reveals about human nature and our relationship with the past. The enduring appeal of Atlantis speaks to fundamental human desires to discover hidden truths, to connect with ancient wisdom, and to believe that lost golden ages once existed when humanity lived in greater harmony and possessed knowledge. We have since forgotten whether or not a physical Atlantis ever existed beneath the waves. Legend serves important cultural and psychological functions, inspiring imagination, encouraging exploration, and reminding us of the impermanence of even the greatest civilizations. In conclusion, the mystery of Atlantis remains unsolved. After more than 2,000 years of speculation, debate, and exploration, the available evidence suggests that Plato most likely created Atlantis as a philosophical allegory, rather than describing a real historical civilization. The lack of archaeological evidence, contemporary historical records, and geological plausibility all argue against the literal existence of Atlantis, as described in Plato's dialogues. However, the stories, enduring power, and the persistent efforts to locate physical evidence of the lost civilization demonstrate how deeply the Atlantis legend has embedded itself in human consciousness. Whether Atlantis was an actual place, a distorted memory of real historical events, or purely a product of Plato's imagination, the legend continues to inspire wonder, curiosity, and debate, encouraging us to question our assumptions about the past and remain open to the possibility that ancient peoples possessed knowledge and achievements. We have yet to fully understand. The search for Atlantis ultimately represents humanity's eternal quest to uncover hidden truths, connect with our origins, and discover whether the legendary golden ages of the past were real or merely beautiful dreams that help us imagine better futures.